Welcome to WYCD Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. It's a 2 for Tuesday, and the second half today is covering the State of the Union address. Ooh boy, I am extraordinarily excited for this. Got a couple of things we're looking for President Biden to address, or that we assume will be addressed. COVID is number one. Why? Well, there's a state of emergency in effect that's likely to be lifted. That would also mean lifting Title 42, which has allowed us to treat people seeking asylum in the United States inhumanely. We've turned people away at our border with the excuse that it's for public health. Really hoping that goes away. Then, police reform. We know the family of Tyree Nichols will be in attendance. I assume that is because President Biden is going to talk about police reform, hopefully at a national level, hopefully not simply saying we should do something and then doing nothing. Ooh. Ran to get here. Started that intro video and then realized I hadn't plugged something in. Ran to plug it in. Doesn't matter. Anyway, your old pal Jake just did some sprinting before we started. Then we're looking at developments with Ukraine aid, hoping to hear that we're going to keep it going, keep sending new and more dangerous vehicles to help them repel the Russian invaders. I cannot stress enough what a world tragedy it is that Russia has invaded Ukraine. It was in 2014 as well. Don't get it twisted. They invaded and took over Crimea by force. We allowed that to happen as a species. We allowed one group of us to invade another and just take their land. Have we learned nothing? Apparently, we are just now learning that we cannot permit that behavior because it just gets worse. It festers, as we are seeing in Ukraine. They took over some of it. Now they're trying to take over the rest. America has been a strong ally. Let's look for President Biden announcing that that's going to keep on going, baby. The deficit was cut by $1.5 trillion. If you care about that sort of thing, look for Biden to spike the ball on that, to take credit where it is due. Also looking for him to discuss abortion rights. The United States has gone backwards in time in terms of the rights that Americans possess due to a highly political, highly right-wing Supreme Court. So we're looking to undo some of that damage if we can. Now, I don't know what Biden is actually going to say regarding this, but I'm hoping, and I want to stress this is a hope. I'm hoping he discusses packing the courts. Packing the courts, oh my gosh, and imposing term limits on Supreme Court seats. That is the most realistic legislative path for going forward with fixing some of these deep-seated issues in the United States. So we're looking forward to all of that. Oh, also, politically speaking, we're looking for him to contrast the Democrats with the GOP. I want to hear him touching in constantly with what the GOP would have you do instead, because people get bored with politics. Doesn't matter how engaging the speaker is. At the end of the day, there's a limit to how much they'll pay attention, and if they don't like the person who's talking, they're really not going to pay attention. So, that means there's a lot of people out there who are under the impression that the GOP has America's best interests in mind, but are just trying to take a different path to get there. That's not so. The GOP has their donors' best interests in mind, and that is it. They are interested in bleeding America for their own profit. The best way Biden can use this to his advantage, which I want him to do, is to constantly contrast what he is doing with what the GOP would have him do, what the GOP is trying to get done. Absolutely want to see him do that. I want him to make the following address as awkward as humanly possible for the GOP. They will be doing, of course, a follow-up to the president's address. Oh, there we go. Got Kamala and Kevin there. They will be doing a follow-up, and I want that to be difficult for them. I want them to have to address issues he's raised in his own speech in their address. I want him to make them look dumb. Because if you try to take the things they are doing and phrase them in a way that makes it look like it's of benefit to America, it's not too terribly difficult to make that look silly. Because it doesn't benefit America. Their plans simply do not. Have a look at the floor right now. I turn down that volume because it's just they're just getting started. So we're this is C-SPAN as well as PBS coverage. We are looking at combined coverage. They are going to get started in about 14 minutes here. Before they get to it, excuse me, let me go back here. Before they get to it, here is what here is what PBS is currently saying about the State of the Union, or rather, what they said a couple hours ago regarding what to expect.
We're going to hear from the president shortly, and a lot has changed in the past year, including the Congress he's addressing. Lisa, the president has often talked about unity. Do you think that he will try to push that idea again to this new yet divided Congress? And what do you think the goal is in doing that if he does so?
Well, I think that politicians in both parties know that Americans are tired of the divide and they're tired of the rancor between the two parties. And you can hear in their words that they are saying the word unity. They are saying words like respect. However, they're going to be tested in the next few weeks to see.
I do want to jump in. Are Americans really tired of the divide? Are they tired of the rancor? I think it depends, if you cut down into that question, what the person hears being asked. I think people on the left wing are real sick of getting attacked by people on the right wing. And for some reason, people in the middle of the road take that as meaning that what the left-wingers are asking for is for their representatives to make nice with the right-wingers. No, it is not. It means beat them thoroughly. Shut them up. Shut them down. It takes a lot of forms, but primarily it means calling them out when they do these things. It means legislating so that they legally cannot do some of these things, such as getting on Fox News and engaging in stochastic terrorism. Yeah, it's time to deal with that legislatively. I don't like the simplification she just used to say, oh, they're tired of the rancor. It gives a weak impression of what Democrats should want at the very least.
See if Republicans running the House of Representatives and the Democratic president actually can get past saying those words and figure out a compromise on big issues, including the debt ceiling. So the tone right now is very...
Again, I'm not interested in compromise. I'm interested in victory, personally.
Very important at the beginning of this new Congress, the first Congress from another party for this Democratic president, and for Republicans who have faced 2 years of charges that they are extremists, that they are a problem in America. They are trying to set a tone of civility. However, as always, as I'm saying, it's actions down the road that matter. But I think both parties realize that the American public really has a low tolerance for the kinds of partisan attacks we've seen for years.
Yeah. a low tolerance from right-wing partisan attacks. Do notice, I've mentioned this many times on the channel, and awesomely, I've had a couple of people tell me they've seen it as well. Notice how difficult it is for corporate media, and at PBS is less so corporate media, but anyway, it's so hard for people in legacy media, let's say, to call a right-winger the problem when they are. Doesn't matter if it's true or not, it's just hard for them to say it. They have to dance around it. If, however, that is reversed and Democrats are being a problem, they'll be like, oh, Democrats, I can't wait to get them. And I understand wanting to criticize even people that you think are doing good overall. I think there's something to be said for that as a value, but I don't think that's what this is. This is just a fear of conservatives.
Laura, what has the White House said about their approach to this Republican leadership and this Congress?
So I think the White House is taking a two-pronged approach, which is that on one hand, they are saying that they would like to continue to work in a bipartisan way. We saw that they got quite a lot of bipartisan bills passed in the first 2 years of President Biden's term. One of the biggest ones was that bipartisan infrastructure law, which the president has been going around the country in the lead up to the State of the Union, and will also be traveling again right after the State of the Union to some other states to promote new infrastructure projects that were made possible by that law. That was one of the biggest ones. There was also the CHIPS semiconductor bill that's made it so there's more manufacturing on semiconductors in the United States and bringing back some of that from China as well.
So let's get to that perhaps later. Right now, what I would like to do is address some of the comments we got. Keep it organized. The CHIPS bill, that was a major victory, and I'm going to add that to certainly to our coverage here, or rather, that list of things we're expecting to see. Certainly, Biden will discuss the CHIPS Act. That was huge. It was huge because America's over-reliance on other countries to produce the chips that our technology runs on. It was as much of a weakness as relying entirely on foreign gasoline is. Part of the reason we have our own gasoline supply and we are loath to use it is because should we go to war with a foreign power, we would not want them to be able to simply shut off our war machines. It's that serious. Now, think of how modern our military technology is. To not have the ability to produce those domestically is literally dangerous. Let's address some comments. Real Bill P says, I'm not getting your live notices. I have to set my alarm to remind me when you go live. I sent a complaint to YouTube about this. Have a great show. Bill P, thank you so much. Use the drop-down box. I'm not sure if you have already, but if you haven't, use the drop-down box next to the bell icon to turn on notifications. It doesn't do that by default when you subscribe. By default, notifications are turned off. So click that drop-down box. There should be something that says notifications. Click on that. You'll get notifications when I go live. You can also customize it. John Bailey says, hi there from San Francisco, California. Great to see and hear you. Great to see and hear you. Oh, great to see you, John. And read what you're saying. I'm delighted to have you. Excited for the State of the Union. And Real Bill P says, greetings from Virginia. I love that we got people from all over the country. That is fantastic. And you, Bill, are close to the action tonight. I'm a little jealous. Oh, boy. It does look like we are on the precipice. Oh, we're 6 minutes away, yeah. Ooh, look at that entrance. Got people on their feet. So, this is C-SPAN's coverage. We also have, possibly going to dip over to that. We also have PBS's coverage. Sorry, it's fun for me to see this from another side. Here, this is PBS. Oh, there's a scumbag. Yeah. Two awful human beings. Decent human being. That's of course Ketanji Brown Jackson, following Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, 3 Supreme Court justices. Ooh, I'm waiting. Okay. I'm going to switch us back over to the C-SPAN feed. So they're going to get started shortly. Again, we are looking for them, or for Joe Biden to mention COVID, the ending of the Title 42. Because of the state of emergency. Title 42 is what is currently allowing the U.S. to engage in the inhumane practice of turning away people at the border who are seeking asylum. Imagine for a moment you're in Mexico and somebody wants to kill you. Doesn't matter why. Just assume that's a fact of your life. And you're saying, you know what I'm going to do about this? I'm going to leave this country because this is dangerous for me. This is dangerous for my family. I'm going to go to the United States. You get there and they say, nope, we're not taking anybody. I don't care why. You stay in Mexico. You try to go to the other end of the country. You try to make it through Mexico, get to the other end of the country, and leave that way. You know you are going to DIE. But the U.S. says no. It's an issue. So we're looking for him to end that. We got the first lady entering. Okay, it's vain, but I'm a vain person. I love the dress. Good God, I love the dress. You know, I'd go blue 100% of the time. But wait, is that Joe Biden? Yeah. Oh, my eyes ain't so good. But yes, we're looking for him to talk about ending of Title 42. We're also looking for him to talk about police reform. We're looking for him to discuss Ukraine and further aid being sent there, or at least, at the very least, to sum up the aid we've given so far, which includes, by the way, both the Bradley and the Abrams. Fantastic additions. Oh, here we go. Fantastic additions to Ukraine's arsenal. We're looking for him to talk about cutting the deficit by $1.5 trillion, abortion rights, and, of course, the CHIPS Act. Should have said that from the jump. Strengthening U.S. independence significantly. Also proofing us against, turn that clapping down, also proofing us against further situations like you saw with the manufacture of cars during a shortage. One of the downsides of putting a religious-like faith in the idea of capitalism is that we are less prepared for hard times. When you have capitalists running everything, then you're not prepared for when there is you don't build surplus, you don't stockpile, you're not prepared for when there is a shortage, because anything that is extra in terms of production that isn't immediately bought and sold, that's seen as waste. The real issue that we've had, and we found that hardest with the manufacture of chips. In fact, a great many of our vehicles were reliant on a specific kind of chip. What was unique about this microchip that caused such a shortage in the United States was that it was the same one made for years and years and years and years, and other technologies that had been reliant on that chip evolved, but cars did not, for a lot of reasons. Part of them being simply that having it be universally accepted meant it was easier to manufacture these vehicles. But that meant that chip was only made for these car manufacturers. And that further meant there was only one maker of that chip. So when that maker, during COVID, had to reduce the amount of chips they made overall because the number of cars being bought got reduced overall. We were reliant on that maker to start up production again when we were coming out of the COVID financial slump. So even though people had money to buy cars, they couldn't buy cars because that maker had to restart its production. If that is Kristen Sinema, yes, it appears to be. Do let her know, number one, fantastic dress. It's killer. Number two, she should be drop kicked for being a bad human being. When production got started up again, it didn't mean, or rather, when people were able to buy cars again, it meant that, okay, I like the dress less with the wings. It meant that there was a longer gap between when people could buy cars and financially and when cars were available to be bought, because we were all reliant on that one chip manufacturer. The CHIPS Act has countered that by saying there must be multiple manufacturers for these things, amongst other things. So really a clever, well, I don't even want to call it clever, really a necessary piece of legislation. I'm glad we got it done. Thank God we got it done before the GOP was in control of the House. I'll quit getting distracted from by fancy dresses. I'll tell you, if I wasn't a political commentator, if I wasn't just obsessed with this stuff, I probably would have been a fashion designer. Your old pal Jake likes a sharp suit. I'll tell you what. Ooh, with abortion rights. So that's gonna be real intriguing. What? Oh, we got Elizabeth Warren. Hey, and darn it, Jake. I do not recognize who she's talking to. Notes for later. With abortion rights, what we are looking forward to is him talking about potentially. I don't think this is going to happen. This is, I suppose, a hope. Talking about packing the courts, the Supreme Court, or installing term limits, or both. I don't think even if that was the plan, even if he said, you know what, we're going to do this in the Oval Office, what he would say tonight is not that they're going to do that. What he would say tonight is discussing, he would talk about abortion, and then he would talk about the failures of the court in general, and then leave it at that and take the tone, take the temperature of the country, and see what the response was. Unfortunately, this is Joe Biden, so he's gonna listen to Fox as much as he's gonna listen to the watchers of MSNBC, etc. But that would be good news if we heard that he was discussing the Supreme Court in the same breath as abortion rights, and if he was saying, just generally speaking, change to the courts. That would be great news for us. Further, oh yeah, it should be beginning any moment now. The deficit being cut by $1.5 trillion, to me, that means very little aside from countering. Let's get my mug off there. Aside from countering the talking points of the GOP, who are consistently saying, "Oh, the deficit, the deficit, the deficit." Well,
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
Here we go. Who are constantly saying what a big deal it is. Well, that guy on screen right now, he cut it by $1.5 trillion. Look at him coming out there. High fives, handshakes. Very different vibe when Biden comes out. When a Democrat comes out as opposed to a Republican. Mr. President, how are you, my friend? Oh, I love it. I have never voted for that man in a primary, but I don't believe I have ever failed to vote for him. Oh gosh, no, there's just the one time. Yeah, so I have never voted for that guy in a primary, but I've never failed to vote about him when he ran and I was able to vote. My opinion on Joe Biden. Oh, look at that face. My opinion on Joe Biden is very, very lukewarm. But the fact that he makes Kevin McCarthy go like this, okay, for that, couple of points in my book, for sure. And I appreciate a well-done pocket square. This is a side note. It's not relevant, really, to anything. It's just a personal take. I would love to see a president not wear that stupid American flag pin. I would love to see a president communicate that they are not just doing performative nonsense, but in fact are a serious business person. I can't imagine anybody else who wakes up, God damn it, Schumer, why are you wearing one too? Who wakes up and says like, I better show people on my suit what I'm all about with the use of a pin. Who gets up and is like, I'm a stock trader, I'll put on my stock trading pin. I'm a lawyer, I'll put my little gavel pin on. Knock it off. Be an adult, wear just a suit. That's all I'm asking. Not at all relevant politically. Ooh, glad handing with awful people. Hey, there you go. Glad handing with Jackson. I'll take that. By the way, new allegations against Kavanaugh. Excuse me. More allegations than we were aware of, apparently, were levied against Kavanaugh. Recent reporting did show the FBI's mishandling of the allegations against him. That is to be covered on a future WYCD stream. I'm shaking hands with the military brass, fair enough. Oh, the pageantry. This is just short of him going to one side of the room being like, I can't hear you. Oh. All right, here we go. Got the Biden brows there. McCarthy might have left his notes on the lectern. Embarrassing.
Thank you.
Let the man get started.
Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and the distinct honor to present to you the President of the United States.
Mr. Speaker.
Nice to hear him acknowledge it.
You can smile, it's okay.
Ha!
Thank you. Please.
You can smile, it's okay. Oh, he's got burns.
Mr. Speaker, Madam Vice President, our First Lady and Second Gentleman, good to see you guys up there. Members of Congress. By the way, Chief Justice, I may need a court order. She gets to go to the game tomorrow, next week. I have to stay home. Got to work something out here. Members of the Cabinet, leaders of our military, Chief Justice, Associate Justice, and retired Justice of the Supreme Court, and to you, my fellow Americans. You know, I start tonight by congratulating the 118th Congress and the new Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy.
It's the classy thing to do.
Speaker, I don't want to ruin your reputation, but I look forward to working with you. And I want to congratulate the new leader of the House Democrats, the first African-American minority leader in history, Hakeem Jeffries.
Boom. Real Bill P says, that's my president, the greatest jobs greatest jobs president in my lifetime. Agreed. Facts are facts. He's created a ton of jobs. I have issues about the quality, but still.
I campaigned for him. Congratulations to the longest-serving leader in the history of the United States Senate, Mitch McConnell. Where are you, Mitch?
Don't congratulate that snake. One thing to congratulate the new Congress. Mitch McConnell deserves no praise for nothing. He is a bad human being.
Another, another term as Senate Minority Leader. I think you. This time you have a slightly bigger majority, Mr. Leader.
Yeah, not minority
leader. About that much bigger?
Thank you for correcting that.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what. I want to give special recognition to someone who I think is going to be considered the greatest speaker in the history of the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi.
She might be. She might be considered that by the history books. Those books will be wrong, but she might be. Did a lot of work to stomp on progressives.
America is a story of progress and resilience, of always moving forward, of never, ever giving up. It's a story unique among all nations. We're the only country that has emerged from every crisis we've ever entered stronger than we got into it. Look, folks, that's what we're doing again. 2 years ago, the economy was reeling. I stand here tonight after we've created, with the help of many people in this room, 12 million new jobs. More jobs created in 2 years than any president's created in 4 years because of you all, because of the American people.
Boom.
2 years
Real
ago,
Bill P, you were right on it. You're right.
And 2 years ago, COVID had shut down. Our businesses were closed. Our schools were robbed of so much. And today, COVID no longer controls our lives. And 2 years ago, democracy faced its greatest threats in civil war. And today, though bruised, our democracy remains unbowed and unbroken.
I am glad to hear him mention this, and I hope that Merrick Garland is listening.
As we gather here tonight,
we got to arrest Trump.
We're writing the next chapter in the great American story, a story of progress and resilience. When world leaders ask me to define America, and they do, believe it or not, I can define it in one word, and I mean this: possibilities. We don't think anything is beyond our capacity. Everything is a possibility. You know, we're often told that Democrats and Republicans can't work together. But over the past 2 years, we've proved the cynics and naysayers wrong. Yes, we disagreed plenty. And yes, there were times when Democrats went alone. But time and again, Democrats and Republicans came together to defend a stronger and safer Europe. You came together to pass once in a generation infrastructure law, building bridges connecting our nation and our people. We came together to pass the most significant law ever, helping victims exposed to toxic burn pits. And in fact,
these are all things Republicans resisted. All things Republicans resisted heartily. Heartily. We got one or two. We got a handful of Republican votes on that. This is not. Don't let them take credit for any of this with this standing ovation. Right now, this is sealing in for Americans that Republicans had a hand in that. They didn't.
Bipartisan pieces of legislation since becoming president. From reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act, to the Electoral Count Reform Act, the Respect for Marriage Act that protects the right to marry the person you love. And to my Republican friends, if we could work together the last Congress, there's no reason we can't work together and find consensus on important things in this Congress as well. I think
Unlikely. Republicans will have to, as always, be forced
folks,
to do anything decent.
you all are as formed as I am, but I think the people sent us a clear message. Fighting for the sake of fighting, power for the sake of power, conflict for the sake of conflict gets us nowhere. That's always been my vision of our country, and I know it's many of yours. To restore the soul of this nation, to rebuild the backbone of America, America's middle class, and to unite the country. We've been sent here to finish the job, in my view. For decades, the middle class has been hollowed out in more than, and not no one administration, but for a long time.
Recently
Too many
discussed on
good-paying
WYCG.
manufacturing jobs move overseas. Factories closed down. Once thriving cities and towns that many of you represent became shadows of what they used to be. And along the way, something else we lost: pride, our sense of self-worth. I ran for president to fundamentally change things, to make sure our economy works for everyone, so we can all feel that pride in what we do. To build an economy from the bottom up and the middle out, not from the top down. Because when the middle class does well, the poor have a ladder up, and the wealthy still do very well. We all do well.
This is what he's talking about when he refers to the middle class being hollowed out. They make less now, overall, as
I
a
know
group.
a lot of you always
the upper
kid me
class.
for always quoting my dad, but my dad used to say, Joey, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. He really would say this. It's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. It's about being able to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay, and mean it. Well, folks, so let's look at the results.
Andrew says
We're not finished
Kevin
yet by any
McCarthy.
stretch of the imagination, but unemployment
trying
rate
to
is at
zone out.
3.4%,
Yeah.
a 50-year low. A near record unemployment.
Excellent to
Near
hear.
record unemployment for black and Hispanic workers. We've already created, your help, 800,000 good-paying manufacturing jobs, the fastest growth in 40 years.
Rock and roll.
Where is it written? Where is it written that America can't lead the world in manufacturing? And I don't know where that's written. For too many decades, we imported projects and exported jobs. Now, thanks to what you've all done, we're exporting American products and creating American jobs. Folks, inflation has been a global problem because the pandemic disrupted our supply chains, and Putin's unfair and brutal war in Ukraine disrupted
All right.
energy supplies as well as food supplies, blocking all that grain in Ukraine. But we're better positioned than any country on earth right now. But we have more to do. But here at home, inflation is coming down. Here at home, gas prices are down $1.50 from their peak. Food inflation is coming down, not fast enough, but coming down. Inflation has fallen every month for the last 6 months.
The rate of
While
inflation.
take-home
yes.
pay has gone up. Additionally, over the last 2 years, a record 10 million Americans applied to start new businesses. 10 million. And by the
Look
way,
at that child, Kevin McCarthy.
every time,
Andrew, you're quite right.
every time someone starts a small business is an act of hope. And Madam Vice President, I want to thank you for leading that effort to ensure that small businesses have access to capital and the historic laws we enacted that are going to just come into being. Standing here last year, I shared with you a story of American genius and possibilities. Semiconductors, small computer chips the size of a fingerprint that power everything, from cell phones to automobiles and so much more.
Is what we were looking
These
for.
chips were
Chips Act.
invented in America. Let's get that straight. They were invented in America. We used to make 40% of the world's chips. In the last several decades, we lost our edge. We're down to only producing 10%. We all saw what happened during the pandemic when chip factories shut down overseas. Today's automobiles need 3,000 chips, each of those automobiles. But American automobiles couldn't make enough cars because there weren't enough chips. Car prices went up, people got laid off. So did everything from refrigerators to cell phones. We can never let that happen again. That's why we came together to pass the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act.
He keeps saying they came together to do this. That's not accurate. He got a couple of Republicans to bend after resisting, whereas the rest resisted.
I know I've been criticized for saying this, but I'm not changing my view.
Make it seem like they're not the
We're
bad
going to make
guys.
sure
They
the
are.
supply chain for America begins in America. The supply chain begins in America. We've already created 800,000 new manufacturing jobs without this law, before the law kicks in. With this new law, we're going to create hundreds of thousands of new jobs across the country. And I mean all across the country, throughout not just the coast, but through the middle of the country as well. That's going to come from companies that have announced more than $300 billion in investment in American manufacturing over the next few years. Outside of Columbus, Ohio, Intel is building semiconductor factories on 1,000 acres, literally a field of dreams. It's going to create 10,000 jobs, that one investment, 7,000 construction jobs, 3,000 jobs in those factories once they're finished. They call them factories.
$5 billion.
Jobs paying an average of $130,000 a year, and many do not require a college degree. Jobs. Because we work together, these jobs where people don't have to leave home to search for opportunity. And it's just getting started. Think about the new homes, the small businesses, the medium-sized businesses. So much more that's going to be needed to support those 3,000 permanent jobs and the factories that are going to be built. Talk to mayors and governors, Democrats and Republicans, and they'll tell you what this means for their communities. We're seeing these field of dreams transform to the heartland. But to maintain the strongest economy in the world, we need the best infrastructure in the world. And folks,
this is true. And I'm glad,
as you all know,
glad they're going to Transportation Secretary there as well.
We used to be #1 in the world in infrastructure. We've sunk to 13th in the world.
Yeah, not for a long,
the United
long
States
time.
of America, 13th in the world in infrastructure, modern infrastructure.
Preach it, brother.
But now we're coming back because we came together and passed the bipartisan infrastructure law, the largest investment in infrastructure since President Eisenhower's interstate highway system.
Had to force the GOP, had to force them, so don't give them equal credit for that. But yes, they did.
And folks, already we've funded over 20,000 projects, including major airports from Boston to Atlanta to Portland. Projects that are going to put thousands of people to work rebuilding our highways, our bridges, our railroads, our tunnels, ports, airports, clean water, high-speed internet, all across America. Urban, rural, tribal. And folks, we're just getting started. We're just getting started.
By the way, make sure your state has prevailing wage laws in place so you get the full benefit of that. Look up yesterday's video if you're curious about that.
Friends who voted for the law.
Yesterday's
And
show.
my Republican friends who voted against it as well. But I still get asked to fund the projects in those districts as well. But don't worry. I promised I'd be a president for all Americans. We'll fund these projects. And I'll see
This
you at
is
the
how you
groundbreaking.
sell that. We're helping everybody, not we're working with all of the
Look,
seditionists. Say we're helping everybody. That's how you
This
do it.
law-
Smart. Good job, Biden.
this law will further unite all of America. Projects like Brent Spence Bridge in Kentucky over the Ohio River, built 60 years ago, badly needed repairs, one of the nation's most congested freight routes, carrying $2 billion worth of freight every single day across the Ohio River. And folks, I've been talking about fixing it for decades, but we're really finally going to get it done. I went there last month, with Democrats and Republicans and from both states to deliver a commitment of $1.6 billion for this project. And while I was there, I met a young woman named Sarah, who's here tonight. I don't know where Sarah is. Is she up in the box? I don't know. Sarah, how are you? Well, Sarah, for 30 years, I learned, she told me she'd been a proud member of the Iron Workers Local 44, known as the Cowboys in the Sky. The folks who built Cincinnati's skyline. Sarah said she can't wait to be 10 stories above the Ohio River building that new bridge. God bless her. That's pride. And that's what we're also building. We're building back pride. Look, we're also replacing poisonous lead pipes that go into 10 million homes in America, 400,000 school and child care centers. So every child in America can drink the water instead of having permanent damage to their brain.
I hope he talks about the stoves, too.
Look.
Tie those in together.
We're making sure that every community in America has access to affordable high-speed internet. No parent should have to drive by McDonald's parking lot to help them do their homework online with their kids.
I didn't even have that.
Many thousands were doing across the country. And when we do these projects, and again, I get criticized for this, but I make no excuses for it. We're going to buy American. We're going to buy America. Folks.
What you're seeing right now would not be possible in parts of the state I live in a lot of parts of Arkansas. Portable internet's a big deal.
With international trade
High-speed internet's a big deal.
Buy America has been the law since 1933, but for too long, past administrations, Democrat and Republican, have not anymore. Tonight, I'm announcing new standards that require all construction materials used in federal infrastructure projects to be made in America.
Whoa.
Made in America.
That's huge.
I mean it.
If I understand that correctly, that's going to have a massive impact
glass,
on our
fiber optic cable. And on my watch, American roads, bridges, and American highways are going to be made with American products as well. Folks, my economic plan is about investing in places and people that have been forgotten.
In a positive way.
So many of you listening tonight, I know you feel it. So many of you felt like you've just simply been forgotten. Amid the economic upheaval of the past 4 decades, too many people have been left behind and treated like they're invisible. Maybe that's you watching from home. You remember the jobs that went away. You remember them, don't you? The folks at home remember them. You wonder whether the path even exists anymore for your children to get ahead without having to move away.
It doesn't.
Well, that's why I get that. That's why we're building an economy where no one's left behind. Jobs are coming back. Pride is coming back. Because choices we made in the last several years.
I was hoping he was going to talk federal minimum wage.
This is, in my view, a blue-collar blueprint to rebuild America and make a real difference in your lives at home. For example, too many of you lay in bed at night like my dad did, staring at the ceiling, wondering what in God's name happens if your spouse gets cancer or your child gets deadly ill. Or something happens to you.
Good to see John Fetterman.
What are you going to get money to pay for those medical bills? Or are you going to have to sell the house or try to get a second mortgage on it? I get it. I get it. With the Inflation Reduction Act that I signed into law,
we're
taking on powerful interests to bring health care costs down so you can sleep better at night with more security.
Give me specifics.
You know, we pay more for prescription drugs than any nation in the world. Let me say it again. We pay more for prescription drugs than any major nation on earth. For example, 1 in 10 Americans has diabetes. Many of you in this chamber do, and in the audience. But every day, millions need insulin to control their diabetes. so they can literally stay alive. Insulin's been around for over 100 years. The guy who invented it didn't even patent it because he wanted it to be available for everyone. It cost the drug companies roughly $10 a vial to make that insulin. Packaging it all, you may get up to $13. But Big Pharma has been unfairly charging people hundreds of dollars, $400 to $500 a month,
Even
making
Kevin
record
McCarthy has to
profits.
concede that.
Not anymore.
His little head nod.
Not
Boom.
anymore.
True. I heckle Biden constantly. Cannot deny it. He took real action. Doesn't take effect till 2026, but he did take action to bring down the price of insulin.
So many things that we did are only now coming to fruition. We said we were doing this, and we said we passed the law to do it, but people didn't know because the law didn't take effect until January 1 of this year. We capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month for seniors on Medicare.
For seniors.
People are just finding out.
Still better than
I'm
nothing.
sure you're getting the same calls I'm getting.
Better than nothing.
Look, there are millions of other Americans who do not or are not on Medicare, including 200,000 young people with type 1 diabetes who need this insulin to stay alive. Let's finish the job this time. Let's cap the cost of insulin for everybody at $35.
Is he listening to this stream? Did he read my diary? Yes. We should absolutely do that. GOP will resist it in the House, but we should do
Big Pharma's
that.
still going to do very well, I promise you all. I promise you they're going to do very well. This law also caps and won't even go into effect until 2025. Costs, out-of-pocket drug costs for seniors on Medicare at a maximum of $2,000 a year. You don't have to pay more than $2,000 a year, no matter how much your drug costs are. Because you know why? You all know it. Many of you, like many in my family, have cancer. You know the drugs can range from $10,000, $11,000, $14,000, $15,000 for the cancer drugs. If drug prices rise faster than inflation, drug companies are going to have to pay Medicare back the difference. We're finally...
That's still only for folks on Medicaid.
We're finally giving Medicare the power to negotiate drug prices. Bringing down prescription drug costs doesn't just save seniors money, it cuts the federal deficit by billions of dollars.
Oh, what a great segue.
By hundreds of billions of dollars.
What a great
These
segue.
prescription drugs are drugs purchased by Medicare to keep their commitment to the seniors. Well, guess what? Instead of paying $400 or $500 a month, you're paying $15. That's a lot of savings for the federal government. And by the way, why wouldn't we want that? Now, some members here are threatening, and I know it's not an official party position, so I'm going to exaggerate, but threatening to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. As my coach, that's okay. That's fair. As my football coach used to say, lots of luck in your senior year. Make no mistake, if you try anything to raise the cost of prescription drugs, I will veto it. Look.
Glad to hear he's not afraid to use that power. Good.
The more Americans have health insurance now than ever in history. A record 16 million people are enrolled in the Affordable Care Act. And thanks to the law I signed last year, saving millions are saving $800 a year on their premiums. And by the way, that law was written and the benefit expires in 2025. So my plea to some of you, at least in this audience, let's finish the job and make these savings permanent. Expand coverage of Medicaid.
Pressure him. Put that pressure on. Oh, look at that. Oh, Christensen.
Look, the Inflation Reduction Act is also the most significant investment ever in climate change. Ever. Lowering utility bills, creating American jobs, leading the world to a clean energy future. I visited the devastating aftermath of record floods, droughts, storms, and wildfires from Arizona to Mexico to all the way up to the Canadian border. More timber has been burned, as I've observed from helicopters, than the entire state of Missouri. And we don't have global warming? Not a problem. In addition to emergency recovery, from Puerto Rico to Florida to Idaho, we're rebuilding for the long term. New electric grids that are able to weather major storms and not prevent those forest fires. Roads and water systems withstand the next big flood. Clean energy to cut pollution and create jobs in communities often left behind. We're going to build 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations installed across the country by tens of thousands of IBEW workers. And
money for the people that build those in America.
$1,000 a year with tax credits to purchase electric
Jennifer
vehicles
Granholm,
and
Energy Secretary.
efficient appliances, energy-efficient appliances.
It means more money for people to build those in the U.S., and it means taking power away from big oil.
Let's face reality. The climate crisis doesn't care if you're in a red or blue state. It's an existential threat. We have an obligation, not to ourselves, but to our children and grandchildren to confront it. I'm proud of how America, at last, is stepping up to the challenge. We're still going to need oil and gas for a while. But guess what? No, we do. But there's so much more to do.
GOP is so lame.
We got to finish the job. And we pay for these investments in our future by finally making the wealthiest and biggest corporations begin
Go F yourself,
to pay their
McCarthy.
fair share. Just begin.
McCarthy being a cheerleader for the villains.
Look, I'm a capitalist. I'm a capitalist, but pay your fair share. I think a lot of you at home agree with me and many people that you know. The tax system is not fair. It is not fair.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's what I'm talking about. Oh, yeah. You got me now. I'm hooked.
2020, 55 of the largest corporations in America, the Fortune 500, made $40 billion in profits and paid zero in federal taxes? Zero? Folks,
Yeah,
it's
get
simply
'em.
not fair. But now, because of the law I signed, billion-dollar companies have to pay a minimum of 15%. God love them. 15%.
Hell yeah.
That's less than a nurse pays.
Hell yeah.
And let me be crystal clear. I said at the very beginning, under my
Tax the
plans,
church,
as long as I'm
absolutely.
president, nobody earning less than $400,000 will pay an additional penny in taxes. Nobody, not one penny. But let's finish the job. There's more to do.
I want you to see Kevin McCarthy
We have to
not
reward
happy
work,
about that.
not just wealth. Pass my proposal for the billionaire minimum tax.
Boom.
You know, there's 1,000 billionaires
Pressure.
in America. It's up from about 600 in the beginning of the term. But no
Jesus.
billionaire should be paying a lower tax rate than a school teacher or firefighter.
Yes, sir.
I mean it.
Yes,
Think
sir.
about it.
This man has been reading my diary. Confirmed.
I mean, look,
100%. Tax those motherfuckers.
I know you aren't enthusiastic about that, but think about it. Think about it.
Friends of billionaires or not.
Have you noticed Big Oil just reported its profits, record profits? Last year they made $200 billion
While we
in
were
the midst of a
suffering.
global energy crisis.
That's right, McConnell.
I
While
think
we
it's
were suffering.
outrageous. Why? They
You
invested
effing turtle.
too little of that profit to increase domestic production. And when I talked to a couple of them, they say, we're afraid you're going to shut down all the oil wells and all the oil refineries anyway, so why should we invest in them? I said, we're going to need oil for at least another decade. And that's going to exceed and beyond that. We're going to need it. Production. If they had, in fact, invested in the production to keep gas prices down, instead, they used the record profits to buy back their own stock, rewarding their CEOs and shareholders. Corporations ought to do the right thing. That's
They ought
why
to be
I
made
propose
to.
we quadruple the tax on corporate stock buybacks and encourage long-term
Yeah,
investments.
yeah, McCarthy, you little punk.
They'll
You're
still
damn
make
right.
considerable profit.
You're damn right.
Let's finish the job and close the loopholes that allow very wealthy to avoid paying their taxes. Instead of cutting the number of audits for wealthy taxpayers, I just signed a law to reduce the deficit by $114 billion by cracking down on wealthy tax cheats.
Ha ha.
That's being fiscally responsible.
Manchin doesn't like that.
In the last 2
Not
years,
thrilled with that.
my administration has cut the deficit by more than $1.7 trillion. The
Yes, he
largest
did.
deficit reduction in American history.
I don't care if you don't like it, McCarthy.
Under the
That's
previous
fact.
administration, the American deficit went up 4 years in a row. Because those record deficits, no president added more to the national debt in any 4 years than my predecessor. Nearly
yes, sir.
25% of the entire national debt
What's the
that
matter,
took over
McCarthy?
200 years to accumulate
You don't like
was
it?
added by just one administration alone, the last one. They're the facts. Check it out.
Them's the facts, baby.
Check it out.
Deal with how you feel about it, GOP. That is
How
truth.
did Congress respond to that debt? They did the right thing. They lifted the debt ceiling 3 times without preconditions or crisis.
Boom.
They paid American bills to
Yep.
prevent an economic disaster in the country. So tonight I'm asking the Congress
He's
to
killing it,
follow
folks.
suit.
He's
Let's
killing
commit
it.
here tonight to the full faith and credit of the United States of America will never, ever be questioned. So some of my Republican friends want to take the
Don't call 'em
economy
your friend.
hostage. I get it, unless I agree to their economic plans. All of you at home should know what those plans are. Instead of making the wealthy pay their fair share, some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. I'm not saying it's a majority.
Yes, they do. Kevin McCarthy's shaking his head. Mike Pence just
Anybody who
talked
doubts
about
it,
that.
Contact my office. I'll give you a copy. I'll give you a copy of the proposal. That means Congress doesn't vote.
Good.
Well, I'm
Them
glad
being
to see
angry
it.
is
No, I
good.
tell you, I enjoy conversion.
That means he heard him.
You know, it means if Congress doesn't keep the programs the way they are, they'd go away. Other Republicans say, I'm not saying it's a majority of you. I don't even think it's even a significant, but it's being proposed by individuals. I'm not politely not naming them, but it's being proposed by some of you.
I love this. I love the outroar.
Folks,
Yes. These are not your
The
friends. You
idea
got to
is
realize it here and now,
that
pal.
we're not going to be moved into being threatened to default on the debt if we don't respond. Folks,
A great speech so far, man. I got to say.
so folks, as we all apparently agree, Social Security and Medicare is off the books now, right? They're not to be sponsored. All right,
Oh, baby. Lock them in.
I'm ready.
They chose to open their yaps. Lock them in. I love it. Yeah, I guess we all do agree, don't we,
Social
huh?
Security- Let's all agree, and we apparently are. Let's stand up for seniors.
If you're digging the stream, by the way, I appreciate likes.
We will not
Feel free
cut
to smash
Social
that button.
Security. We will not cut Medicare. Those benefits belong to the American people. They earned it. And if anyone tries to cut Social Security, which apparently no one's going to do, and if anyone tries to cut Medicare, I'll stop them. I'll veto it.
Beautiful.
And look, I'm not going to
Beautiful.
allow them to be taken away. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. But apparently it's not going to be a problem. Next month,
Make
when I
them
offer
eat
my
it.
fiscal plan, I ask my Republican friends to lay down their plan as well. I really mean it. Let's sit down together and discuss our mutual plans together. Let's do that. I can tell you, the plan I'm going to show you is going to cut the deficit by another $2 trillion. And it won't cut a single bit of Medicare or Social Security. In fact, we're going to extend the Medicare Trust Fund at least 2 decades. Because that's going to be the next argument. How do we keep it solvent, right? Well, we'll not raise tax on anyone making under 400 grand, but we'll pay for it the way we talked about tonight, by making sure that the wealthy and big corporations pay their fair share. Look. Here's the deal. They aren't just taking advantage of the tax code. They're taking advantage of you, the American consumer. Here's my message to all of you out there. I have your back. We're already preventing Americans from receiving surprise medical bills, stopping $1 billion surprise bills per month so far. We're protecting seniors' life savings by cracking down on nursing homes that commit fraud, endanger patient safety, prescribe drugs that are not needed. Millions of Americans can now save thousands of dollars because they can finally get a hearing aid over the counter without a prescription. Look, capitalism without competition is not capitalism. It's extortion. It's exploitation. Last year, I cracked down with the help of many of you on foreign shipping companies that were making you pay higher prices for every good coming into the country. I signed a bipartisan bill that cut shipping costs by 90%, helping American farmers, businessmen, and consumers. Let's finish the job. Pass the bipartisan legislation to strengthen antitrust enforcement and prevent big online platforms from giving their own products an unfair advantage.
As Google is being sued for right now. Rosa says, Uncle Joe is killing it. I love it. I agree.
Also taking on junk fees. Those hidden surcharges too many companies use to make you pay more. For example, we're making airlines show you the full ticket price up front, refund your money if your flight is canceled or delayed. We've reduced exorbitant bank overdrafts by saving consumers more than $1 billion a year. We're cutting credit card late fees by 75% from $30 to $8.
The no-sell McCarthy's doing is because he resisted all of that.
Junk
fees, the GOP resisted all of that.
May not matter to the very wealthy, but they matter to most other folks in homes like the one I grew up in, like many of you did. They add up to hundreds of dollars a month. They make it harder for you to pay your bills or afford that family trip. I know how unfair it feels when a company overcharges you and gets away with it. Not anymore. We've written a bill to stop it all. It's called the Junk Fee Prevention Act. We're going to ban surprise resort fees that hotels charge on your bill. Those fees can cost you up to $90 a night at hotels that aren't even resorts. The idea that cable, internet, and cell phone companies can charge you $200 or more if you decide to switch to another provider. Give me a break. We can stop service fees on tickets to concerts and sporting events and make companies disclose all the fees up front. And we'll prohibit airlines from charging $50 round trip for family just to be able to sit together. Baggage fees are bad enough. Airlines can't treat your child like a piece of baggage. Americans are tired of being.
Good line.
We're tired of being played for suckers. So pass.
Excellent.
Pass the Junk Fee Prevention Act so companies stop ripping us off. For too long, workers have been getting stiffed, but not anymore. We're beginning to restore the dignity of work. For example, I should have known this, but I didn't until 2 years ago. 30 million workers have to sign non-compete agreements for the jobs they take. 30 million. So a cashier at a burger place can't walk across town and take the same job at another burger place and make a few bucks more.
It's true.
But they just changed it because we exposed it. That was part of the deal, guys. Look it up. But not anymore. We're banning those agreements so companies have to compete for workers and pay them what they're worth.
I love that he is putting the GOP, as we said, he is putting the GOP up front.
And I must tell you,
in terms of who resisted this legislation.
This is bound to get a response from my friends on my left but the right. I'm so sick and tired of companies breaking the law by preventing workers from organizing. Pass the PRO Act.
Yeah, boy.
Businesses have a right Workers
I didn't
have
even
the right
think
to
he
form
talked
a
about that.
union. And let's guarantee all
That's
workers
excellent.
have a living wage.
Hell
Let's
yeah.
make sure working parents can afford to raise a family with sick days, paid family medical leave, affordable child care. That's going to enable millions of more people to go and stay at work. And let's restore the full child tax credit.
Yes.
Save tens of millions of parents some breathing room and cut child poverty in half to the lowest level in history. And by the way, when we do all these things, we increase productivity. We increase economic growth.
That
So
won't
let's finish the
happen,
job
but I like that he's calling
and get
for
more
it.
families access to affordable quality housing. Let's get seniors who want to stay in their homes the care they need to do so. Let's give more breathing room to millions of family caregivers looking after their loved ones. Pass my plan so we get seniors and people with disabilities the home care and services they need. And support the workers who are doing God's work. These plans are fully paid for and we can afford to do them. Restoring the dignity of work means making education an affordable ticket to the middle class. You know, when we made public education, 12 years of it universal in the last century,
Shots are
we made
hilarious.
the best educated, best paid, we became the best educated, best paid nation in the world. But the rest of the world's caught up.
True.
It's caught up.
True.
Jill, my wife, who teaches full time, has an expression. I hope I get it right, kid. Any nation that out-educates us is going to outcompete us. Any nation that out-educates is going to outcompete us.
That's how to
Folks, we
approach
all
it
know 12
when
years
talking
of
to the GOP.
education is not enough to win the economic competition of the 21st century. We want to have the best educated workforce. Let's finish the job.
So all the stuff he's calling
to
for.
preschool for 3 and 4 years old. Studies show that children who go to preschool are nearly 50% more likely to finish high school and go on to earn a 2 or 4 year degree, no matter their background they came from. Let's give public school teachers a raise. We're making progress.
I'm going to talk over him for a moment. All this stuff he's calling for, bear in mind this context. Not going to happen, because it must go through a GOP House at some point. So unless he says, I'm going to do this as president with an executive order, it's just aspirational. But I like that he's putting pressure on the GOP. They won't do these things, and he knows it. And he's highlighting for the American people what they won't do. I'm worried they'll hear this is a promise. It's not.
Folks, in the midst of the COVID crisis, when schools were closed and we were shutting down everything, let's recognize how far we came in the fight against the pandemic itself. While the virus is not gone, thanks to the resilience of the American people and the ingenuity of medicine, we've broken the COVID grip on us.
Looking for Title
COVID
42.
deaths are down by 90%. We've saved millions of lives and opened up our country. We opened our country back up, and soon we'll end the public health emergency. But
Title
that's
42.
called a public health emergency. But we'll remember the toll and pain that's never going to go away. More than 1 million Americans lost their lives to COVID. 1 million. Families grieving. Children orphaned. Empty chairs at the dining room table constantly reminding you that she used to sit there. Remembering them, we remain vigilant. We still need to monitor dozens of variants and support new vaccines and treatments. So Congress needs to fund these efforts and keep America safe. And as we emerge from this crisis stronger, we're also got to double down on prosecuting criminals who stole relief money meant to keep workers and small businesses.
Good. Very good to hear him say that. There was a ton of GOP swindlers, by the way, that did exactly that.
Before I came to office, you remember, during that campaign, the big issue was about inspector generals who would protect taxpayers' dollars who were sidelined. They were fired. Many people say we don't need them. And fraud became rampant. Last year, I told you the watchdogs are back. Since then, we've recovered billions of taxpayers' dollars. Now let's triple the anti-fraud strike force going after these criminals, double the statute of limitations on these crimes, and crack down on identity fraud by criminal syndicates stealing billions of dollars from the American people.
Jim Green says Joe beating them like a drum. Yeah, he is.
The taxpayers get back
Yeah,
at least 10 times as much. It matters. It matters. Look, COVID left its scars, like the spike in violent crime in 2020, the first year of the pandemic. We have an obligation to make sure all people are safe. Public safety depends on public trust, as all of us know. But too often that trust is violated. Joining us tonight are the parents of Tyree Nichols. Welcome.
I hope he calls for federal police reform. It won't happen, but it will put the spotlight on the GOP for failing to do it. Federal police reform is what we're listening for.
Personally know, there's no words to describe the heartache or grief of losing a child. But imagine if you lost that child at the hands of the law. Imagine having to worry whether your son or daughter came home from walking down the street, playing in the park, or just driving a car. Most of us in here have never had to have the talk that brown and black parents have had to have with their children. Bo, Hunter, Ashley, my children, I never had to have the talk with them. I never had to tell them if a police officer pulls you over, turn your interior lights on right away. Don't reach for your license. Keep your hands on the steering wheel. Imagine having to worry like that every single time.
Incredibly depressing.
Your kid got in a car. Here's what Tyree's mother shared with me when I spoke to her. When I asked her how she finds the courage to carry on and speak out. The faith of God, she said her son was, quote, a beautiful soul, and something good will come of this. Imagine how much courage and character that takes. It's up to us, to all of us. We all want the same thing. Neighborhoods free of violence. Law enforcement who earns the community's trust. Just as every cop, when they pin on that badge in the morning, has a right to be able to go home at night, so does everybody else out there.
Yes.
Our children
have
a right to come home safely. Equal protection under the law is a covenant we have with each other in America. We know
federal police reform.
Put their lives on the line every
What
single
are you
night
gonna
and
do?
day.
Hit me.
And we know we ask them in many cases to do too much, to be counselors, social workers, psychologists, responding to drug overdoses, mental health crises, and so much more. In one sense, we ask much too much of them.
Don't tell me you're
I know
going to put
most
more
cops and
money
their
into
families
that.
are good, decent, honorable people, the vast majority. But they risk.
Performative clowns, the GOP.
And they risk their lives every time they put that shield on.
In front of Tyree
But what
Nichols'
happened
parents.
to Tyree in Memphis happens too often. We have to do better. Give law enforcement the real training they need. Hold them to higher standards. Help them succeed in keeping us safe. We also need more first responders and professionals to address the growing mental health, substance abuse challenges.
But not cops.
More resources to reduce violent crime and gun crime.
Not cops to do
More
that.
community intervention programs. More investment in housing, education, and job training.
This is getting real general. Tell me about federal
All
police
this
reform.
can help prevent
police
violence
reform
in
at
the
a federal
first
level.
place. When police officers or police departments violate the public trust, they must be held accountable.
Yes.
With the support of the families of victims.
Kevin McCarthy
Civil
gets
rights
credit
groups
for that
and law
standing.
enforcement. I signed an executive order for all federal officers, banning chokeholds, restricting no-knock warrants, and other key elements of the George Floyd Act. Let's commit ourselves to make the words of Tyler's mom true. Something good must come from this.
Give me another executive.
Something good. And all of us,
I don't hear him saying it, and it's making me sad. Real quick, though, Real Bill P says, I had that
Folks, it's
talk with my
difficult, but
son.
it's simple.
I'm so sorry.
All of us in this chamber, we need to rise to this moment. We can't turn away. Let's do what we know in our hearts that we need to do. Let's come together to finish the job on police reform. Do something. Do
What?
something.
Be specific.
That was the plea of parents who lost
Federal
their children in
police
Uvalde.
reform.
I met with every one of them. Do something about gun violence. Thank God. Thank God we did. Passing the most sweeping gun safety law in 3 decades. That includes things like that the majority of responsible gun owners already support. Enhanced background checks for 18 to 21 years old. Red flag laws, keeping guns out of the hands of people who are a danger to themselves and others. But we know our work is not done. Joining us tonight is Brandon Say, a 26-year-old hero. Brandon put his college dreams on hold to be at his mom's side. His mom's side when she was dying from cancer. And Brandon...
No talk of a executive order or any federal legislation
Brandon
on
now
police
works
reform.
at the dance studio started by his grandparents. And 2 weeks ago, during the Lunar New Year celebrations, he heard the studio door close, and he saw a man standing there pointing a semi-automatic pistol at him. He thought he was going to die, but he thought about the people inside. And in that instant, he found the courage to act and wrestled a semi-automatic pistol away from the gunman who had already killed 11 people in another dance studio. 11. He saved lives. It's time we do the same. Ban assault weapons now.
Boom.
Ban them now.
Boom. Make the GOP the ones, yeah, you punks. Make the GOP the ones that have to bear the responsibility for that.
In 1994.
Because they do.
And in 10 years, that ban was law and mass shootings went down. After we
Yes,
let it
they
expire in the Republican administration, mass shootings tripled. Let's finish the job and ban these assault weapons. And let's also come together on immigration. Make it a bipartisan issue once again. We know we now have a record number of personnel working to secure the border, arresting 8,000 human smugglers, seizing over 23,000 pounds of fentanyl in just the last several months.
He's doing a great job of hanging around the neck the failures of the GOP, hanging the GOP's failures around their neck. He's doing a fantastic job of that.
But American border problems won't be fixed until Congress acts. If we don't pass my comprehensive immigration reform, at least pass my plan to provide the equipment and officers to secure the border.
But couldn't care less about this.
And a pathway to citizenship for dreamers.
Do care about
Those on
that.
temporary status, farm workers, essential workers.
We need him.
Here in the People's House, it's our duty to protect all the people's rights and freedoms. Congress must restore the right and the Congress must restore the right that was taken away in Roe v. Wade and protect
keep
Roe
that
v.
eye
Wade.
contact. Hell yeah.
Give every woman a
Hell
consular
yeah.
right. The Vice President and I are doing everything
Deal with that,
to
Republicans.
protect access to reproductive health care and safeguard patient safety. Well,
Right
already
there.
more than a dozen states are enforcing
You have
extreme
a
abortion bans.
snapshot
Make no mistake about it.
of the GOP
If Congress
and
passes a
Democrats'
national
stance on
ban,
that.
I will veto it.
Hell yeah.
But let's also pass the Bipartisan Equality Act to ensure LGBTQ Americans, especially transgender young people, can live with safety and dignity. Our strength is not just the example of our power, but the power of our example.
Cinema should not
Let's
ever
remember the
draw
world's
attention to
watching.
herself.
I spoke from this chamber 1 year ago, just days after Vladimir Putin unleashed his brutal attack against Ukraine. A murderous assault, evoking images of death and destruction Europe suffered in World War II. Putin's invasion has been a test for the ages, a test for America, a test for the world. Would we stand for the most basic of principles? Would we stand for sovereignty? Would we stand for the right of people to live free of tyranny? Would we stand for the defense of democracy? For such defense matters to us because it keeps peace and prevents open season on would-be aggressors and threatens our prosperity.
Hell yes. Hell yes.
1 year later, we know the answer. Yes, we would, and we did. We did.
Damn right.
And together, we did what America always does at our best. We led. We
Talk about the
united
Bradley.
NATO.
Talk about
We
the
built a
Abrams.
global coalition. We stood against Putin's aggression. We stood with the Ukrainian people. Tonight, we're
Talk about
once
the
again
javelins.
joined by Ukraine's ambassador to the United States. She represents not just her nation, but the courage of her people. Our ambassador is here, united. We're united in our support of your country.
He also
Would
thrown
you
by the guy
stand
that
so we can all
didn't
take
his
a look
hat
at
off
you?
inside.
Thank you.
Slava Ukraini.
Because we're going to stand with you as long as it takes.
Hell yeah.
Our nation is working for more freedom, more dignity, more peace, not just in Europe, but everywhere. Before I came to office, the story was about how the People's Republic of China was increasing its power and America was failing in the world. Not anymore. We made clear, and I made clear in my personal conversations, which have been many, with President Xi, that we seek competition, not conflict. But I will make no apologies that we're investing to make America stronger. Investing in American
talk about that
innovation and
balloon?
industries that will define the future that China intends to be dominating. Investing in our alliances and working with our allies to protect advanced technologies so they will not be used against us. Modernizing our military to safeguard stability and deter aggression. Today, we're in the strongest position in decades to compete with China or anyone else in the world. Anyone else in the world. And I'm committed.
Oh, the military
I'm
guys.
committed to work with China where we can advance American interests and benefit the world. But make no mistake about it. As we made clear last week, if China threatens our sovereignty, we will act to protect our country, and we did.
Okay, he's talking about
Look.
the balloon. All right.
Let's be clear. Winning the competition should unite all of us. We face serious challenges across the world. But in the past 2 years, democracies have become stronger, not weaker. Autocracies have grown weaker, not stronger. Name me a world leader who changed places with Xi Jinping. Name me one. Name me one. America's rallying the world to meet those challenges, from climate to global health, to food insecurity, to terrorism, to territorial aggression. Allies are stepping up, spending more, and doing more. Look, the bridges we're forming between partners in the Pacific and those in the Atlantic, and those who bet against America are learning how wrong they are. It's never, ever been a good bet to bet against America. Never.
I got to admit,
When
I
came
got
to
to admit, I
office,
love the
most
chant.
assured that bipartisanship assumed was impossible, but never believed it. That's why a year ago I offered a unity agenda to the nation as I stood here. We made real progress together. We passed a law making it easy for doctors to prescribe effective treatments for opioid addiction. We passed the gun safety law, making historic investments in mental health. We launched the ARPA-H drive for breakthrough in the fights against cancer, Alzheimer's, and diabetes, and so much more. We passed the Heath Robinson PACT Act, named after the late Iraq War veteran whose story about exposure to toxic burn kits I shared here last year. I understand something about those burn pits, but there's so much more to do. We can do it together. Joining us tonight is a father named Doug from Newton, New Hampshire. He wrote Jill, my wife, a letter, and me as well, about his courageous daughter, Courtney. A contagious laugh, his sister's best friend, her sister's best friend. He shared a story all too familiar to millions of Americans and many of you in the audience. Courtney discovered pills in high school. It spiraled into addiction and eventually death from a fentanyl overdose. She was just 20 years old. Describing the last 8 years without her, Doug said, "There's no worse pain." Yet their family has turned pain to purpose, working to end the stigma and change laws. He told us he wants to start a journey toward American recovery. Doug, we're with you. Fentanyl is killing more than 70,000 Americans a year. Big, you got it.
That Gates, F that mother.
So
Ridiculous.
let's launch a major surge to stop fentanyl production and the sale and trafficking with more drug detection machines, inspection cargo, stop pills and powder at the border. Working with couriers like FedEx to inspect more packages for drugs.
I cannot wait for the rest of America to wake up and kick MAGA the hell out of Congress. I'm sick of
Especially
it.
for our children. When millions of young people are struggling with bullying, violence, trauma, we owe them greater access to mental health care at their schools. We must finally hold social media companies accountable for experimenting they're doing running children for profit. It's time
Hell
to
yeah.
pass bipartisan legislation
Hell
to
yeah.
stop big tech from collecting personal data on our kids and
Hell
teenagers online.
yes. We discussed this earlier.
Ban targeted advertising to children and impose stricter limits on the personal data that companies collect on all of us. Third, let's do more to keep this nation's one truly sacred obligation to equip those we send into harm's way and care for them and their families when they come home. Job training, job placement for
Sure.
veterans
Sure.
and their spouses as they come to return to civilian life. Helping veterans afford their rent, because no one should be homeless in America, especially someone who served the country.
No one at all. No one at all should be homeless in America. That I agree with. And the second half as well.
Dennis
So that's covered by no one at all.
Dennis McDonough is here, of the VA. We had a first real discussion when I asked him to take the job. I'm glad he did. We were losing up to 25 veterans a day on suicide. Now we're losing 17 a day to the silent scourge of suicide. 17 veterans a day are committing suicide. More than all the people being killed in the wars. Folks, VA is doing everything it can, including expanding mental health screening, proven programs that recruits veterans to help other veterans understand what they're going through, get them the help they need. We got to do more. And fourth, last year, Jill and I reignited the cancer moonshot that I was able to start with President Obama asked me to lead our administration on this issue.
Hell
Our
yes.
goal is to cut the cancer death rates at least by 50% in the next 25 years. turn more cancers from death sentences to treatable diseases, provide more support for patients and their families. It's personal to so many of us in this audience. Joining us are Morris and Candice, an Irishman and the daughter of immigrants from Panama. They met and fell in love in New York City and got married in the same chapel Jill and I got married in New York City. Kindred spirits. He wrote us a letter about his little daughter, Ava, and I saw her just before I came over. She was just a year old when she was diagnosed with rare kidney disease, cancer.
Oh, gee.
After 26 blood transfusions, 11 rounds of radiation, 8 rounds of chemo, 1 kidney removed, giving a 5% survival rate. He wrote how in the darkest moments he thought, if she goes, I can't stay. Many of you have been through that as well. Jill and I understand that like so many of you. And he read Jill's book describing our family's cancer journey and how we tried to steal moments of joy where we could with Bo. For them, that glimmer of joy was the half smile of their baby girl. It meant everything to them. They never gave up hope. Little Ava never gave up hope. She turns 4 next month. They just found out Ava's beating the odds, is on her way to being cured of cancer. And she's watching from the White House tonight if she's not asleep already. For the lives we can save.
Oh, you love to hear it. Well done, Ava. Well
the
done.
lives we've lost. Let this be a truly American moment that rallies the country and the world together and proves that we can still do big things. 20 years ago, under the leadership of President Bush and countless advocates and champions, he undertook a bipartisan effort through PEPFAR to transform the global fight against HIV/AIDS. It's been a huge success. He thought big. He thought large. He moved. I believe we can do the same thing with cancer. Let's end cancer as we know it. Cure some cancers once and for
Hell yeah.
all. Folks, there's one reason why we've been able to do all of these things. Our democracy itself. It's the most fundamental thing of all. With democracy, everything's possible. Without it, nothing is. For the last few years, our democracy has been threatened and attacked, put at risk,
Yes.
put to the test in this very room on January the 6th. And then just a few months ago, an unhinged,
no smug
big
look,
lie,
McCarthy?
assailed and unleashed a political violence, the home of the then Speaker of the House of Representatives, using the very same language the insurrectionists used as they stalked these halls and chanted on January 6th.
Get him.
Here tonight in this chamber is a man who bears the scars of that brutal attack, but is as tough and as strong, as resilient as they get. My friend Paul Pelosi. Paul, stand up.
And now I feel bad for teasing about the hat. Holy Christ, that's Paul Pelosi. Jesus.
But such a heinous act should have never
Terrorists tried to
happened.
assassinate him.
We must all speak out. There's no place for political violence in America.
Jesus.
We have to protect the right to vote, not suppress the fundamental right. Honor the results of our elections, not subvert the will of the people. We have to uphold the rule of law and restore trust in our institutions of democracy. And we must give hate and extremism in any form no safe harbor.
The attack on Paul Pelosi is nothing short of the caning of Charles Sumner. Same thing.
Must not be a partisan issue. It's an American issue. Every generation of Americans has faced a moment where they have been called to protect our democracy, defend it, stand up for it.
Protecting
this is
them
our
against that guy,
My fellow Americans,
McCarthy, and his
meet
ilk.
tonight at an inflection point. One of those moments that only a few generations ever face, where the direction we now take is going to decide the course of this nation for decades to come. We're not bystanders of history. We're not powerless before the forces that confront us. It's within our power of we, the people. We're facing the test of our time. We have to be the nation we've always been at our best. Optimistic, hopeful, forward-looking. A nation that embraces light over dark, hope over fear, unity over division, stability over chaos. We have to see each other not as enemies, but as fellow Americans. We're good people. The only nation in the world built on an idea. The only one.
I just want to make sure that, when McCarthy heard that possibly soda can opening, I also thought that might have been a gunslide going off.
Ethnicity. But we're the only nation based on an idea that all of us, every one of us, is created equal in the image of God. A nation that stands as a beacon to the world. A nation in a new age of possibilities. So I've come to fulfill my constitutional obligation to report in the State of the Union. And here's my report. Because the soul of this nation is strong, because the backbone of this nation is strong, because the people of this nation are strong, the State of the Union is strong.
Not sure I wholeheartedly agree that the State of the Union is strong. We are not united.
I'm not
but I
new
agree
to
with
this
the
place.
sentiment.
I stand here tonight having
behind
served
it.
as long as about any one of you have ever served here. But I've never been more optimistic about our future, about the future of America. We just have to remember who we are. We're the United States of America, and there's nothing beyond our capacity if we do it together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.
So we're going to stick around for the GOP response. Overall, I have to say, I was impressed with Joe Biden here. Again, I if you've seen me in the past, you know I'm critical of him every chance I get. I think that is necessary. Even if you're a political commentator, that's necessary in order to keep politicians on their toes. I think the media has an obligation to do that, and I do disagree with Joe Biden on a lot. So despite the fact that I'm looking to nitpick, I really have to say I approve of this State of the Union address. He did what I was looking for him to do. Where there have been accomplishments, he was clear about it. He said it in plain language. I don't know why, but Democrats often do not do that. They'll accomplish something, and they'll say it in such a way that it takes all day to get to the point, and it's not clear when they've got there. You got to go back and have Wikipedia up and all this stuff. No, he was straightforward about it. In addition, he hung around the necks of the GOP the decisions, or rather the issues that are coming up. And he's made it clear where he is going to try to steer America. Don't get that confused with where America will go. With a House that is controlled by the GOP, it does not matter that we have the Senate and the presidency controlled by Democrats. A Democratic agenda just won't get done. No agenda, frankly, will get done. Unless, of course, it's a Democrat-style bill that benefits primarily Republican voters. Which isn't, I mean, that's going to be, again, where people get the sense that Democrats aren't working for them. It's because they keep compromising with the GOP, which always cuts out the poor, the people of color, the minorities. So we're not going to get progress done, but he's made it clear what the Democrats are going to be trying to do and who is going to be stopping it. That is good. There's millions of Americans who will see this tonight and that don't normally watch political coverage. So the fact that he made it clear, look, the people that are going to be stopping this good stuff from getting it done, They're the people that are booing during the applause lines. That was good. It was good politics. I'm glad he did it. I'm glad he talked about the CHIPS Act. I am glad he talked about the Junk-Free Protection Act. I'm glad he talked about the PRO Act. He briefly mentioned Ukraine. He only tangentially mentioned police reform. He didn't say anything specific. He didn't talk about anything he would be doing. That was disappointing. I also didn't hear him talk about Title 42. That was concerning. It tells me they may look for a way, God help me, in the Biden White House to preserve Title 42. That's that effort to keep people out of our country, immigrants out of our country who are seeking asylum under the guise of COVID protections. That is, frankly, something that makes me nervous, and I think we should watch out for in the future. But by and large, it was an incredibly satisfying State of the Union. He did not hesitate to make clear where where the governing bodies of America stand. Also, here's a piece of criticism. I really did not like all the times that, or rather, in contrast, I did not like all the times he called legislation bipartisan that barely got any GOP support. The reason being, for your average American, that makes it seem like this is something that the GOP sat down with the Democrats about, and they said, we both agree there's a problem here. How can we fix it? It's not what happened. This is legislation that barely passed, because most Republicans voted against it. And America needs to understand, when you're voting Republican, you're voting against anything of use getting done. You're voting for people that are going to bleed America as much as possible on behalf of big corporations. That's what you're voting for. I would have preferred he made that a lot more clear. I also would have loved to hear him talk about cork packing. I didn't think that was likely, and I don't think that's a thing he is going to pursue at all. But all around, if you're looking for the Jake assessment here of that State of the Union, fantastic. Really fantastic. Let me jump over to PBS NewsHour for a moment and hear a little bit of the crowd here.
More about what a weak China might do, more than what we used to worry about maybe 2-3 years ago, which was this dominant China force.
We have Lisa Desjardins with us, still there at her,
Let's hear PBS for a moment.
Atop the House floor there in the House gallery. Lisa, give us a sense of what you saw. It was a very active crowd, at times an unruly House chamber there. Fill us in.
So many thoughts. At the beginning, I think the section where he was talking about a lot of statistics, a lot of numbers, bragging about his accomplishments, that's when we saw the crowd here listening, but not as emotional. As they got into sections about the border in particular, about China, then we saw the eruptions from the Republican side. And I have to say, I'm still digesting on whether I witnessed something like a House of the British Parliament, or was this more like a bar room? There was a real lack of restraint on the heart of many Republicans, not just the ones we usually suspect, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has had outbursts today and in the past, but other Republicans who I have not seen burst out before, yelling on the floor of the chamber. It makes me think there is still this underlying political lack of ability, not only for discourse, but they are erring on the side of shouting in a way I had not really felt before. Not major, but this was different than other speeches. More people.
I definitely agree with her here. Let me jump in for a second here, because we just talked about this. Yeah, they were like a bar room, and it was an embarrassment, and that is what prompted me to say I can't wait to get rid of these MAGA fools. Real Bill P says, I like the fact that he pulled no punches with the MAGA cult. Now the rest of the Democrat Party has got to continue his message. Wholeheartedly agree. Here's something to consider. Not only do you do that to show sane Americans that we're not going to put up with this and this behavior is not appropriate, you also do that, believe it or not, to win over Republicans. They don't respond. A lot of the folks who are in this cult do not respond to facts and logic. They make all decisions based on emotion, and they judge morality based on consequence. As in, if there's no consequence for an action, they think it must have been moral. So when you treat them harshly, you are also providing for them the understanding of what their behavior is viewed as by sane human beings. They understand then that their behavior is not acceptable. Jim Green says, a grand slam. Well done, Joe. Jim, I wholeheartedly agree. I do believe that is a good way to put it. I mean, he knocked it right out of the park. He's doing some glad handing here. A well-earned bunch of handshakes. Somebody, I'm sure it's going to get picked up later, and I'll certainly talk about it. But at some point, I believe I heard somebody opening a soda can by a microphone. I don't know whether or not that was intentional, but you had McCarthy look off to the side and double take. That's the state America's in. We're not sure. And by the way, a lot of folks allowed to just carry guns now. We're not sure if someone's going to take a shot at the president while he's giving the State of the Union because of what these people have done. Well, folks, if you're watching on the live chat, have a look at this. We have cute little GIFs that members can use. I don't like to keep content separate from members, but if you are a member, you do have access to these. These are emojis that you can use if you are a member of WYCD. That stands for What You Can Do, and members get access to Bradley from Majority Report laughing. Jared and Ivanka. Ivanka represented as a purse dog. Dr. Santos, which is, of course, the Marvel Cinematic Universe of George Santos. And then 2 for Tuesday, Jake. Yeah, these are available. We're going to have more available as we get more members. All right, let's go back to PBS NewsHour. Listen to what they're saying.
Late fees, as well as this line that stood out saying that airlines are treating your children like baggage. This is him trying to clearly show that he hears that not all Americans are feeling as though they're getting help in their pocketbooks, and this has been a key element for the White House in recent months. And then lastly, Amna, of course, when President Joe Biden talked about the, quote, the talk, which is the talk that Black and brown families have with their kids about police and their interactions with police. And to hear President Biden talk about that, a white president, especially after he worked as vice president for President Barack Obama, it reminded me of when Obama specifically talked about the personal feelings that he felt when Trayvon Martin was killed in 2012, and that if he had had a son, his son would have looked like Trayvon Martin. President Biden, this is an issue that has police brutality as well as the racial reckoning that the country has faced through all of these killings of black people is something that he struggled with during the 2020 presidential campaign. He came under fire from fellow Democrats, including Senator Cory Booker, including Senator Kamala Harris, for the way that he talked about how he worked with segregationists when he was in the Senate. And so this is something to hear him come full circle and to very aggressively talk about what it was like, and that empathetic tone that you mentioned, Amna, was really striking.
It was a powerful moment there, and of course acknowledging as well the parents of Tyree Nichols in the chamber watching all of that tonight. Amy Walter here in the studio with us. Amy, the other thing we noted as the president was talking, many cases directly to middle-class Americans, right, talking about his repeating the promise that people making under $400,000 a year would not see any increase in taxes. There was also a listing of sort of everyday frustrations we hear from Americans all the time, right? Things I did not expect to hear about resort fees.
I did not
or
either.
junk fees
No.
or credit card late fees, but
That's
this is a man who lives in the details.
Well, also in the day-to-day lives of people, right? Most Americans are not engaged on policy in the way that the people around this table and the people in that room are, right? Their day-to-day existence is about what is government doing to make my life a little bit better, a little less challenging. No, it's not changing the world. It's not turning the world on its axis to take a resort fee out. But what it suggests is it's the little things that start to add up. The family economy, the budget that, you're worried for every one of these little expenses. Now, if you're Republicans, you say, yeah, the reason that they're worried about these little expenses is because everything's more expensive now. The inflation that people are feeling is because of Joe Biden's reckless spending. That's the argument you should expect to hear, I think, from Republicans after the president leaves the chamber and over the course of the campaign in 2024. But I think the fact that the president spent most of his time talking about what he had already accomplished, the administration had already accomplished, the 300 bipartisan bills that were already passed, rather than trying to focus on big, huge things we're going to get done in the next 2 years, is a nod to the reality of a divided Congress and also a nod to the fact that he's going to be spending a lot more time these next year and a half talking about what has happened as opposed to what could happen.
Jonathan Capehart, can we talk about the new urgency?
Jim Green says, spot on analysis, Jake. Jim, thank you. I appreciate it.
I just saw Congressman Al Green on the floor there, and he has a button. We saw a number of the members of the Congressional Black Caucus wearing these 1870 pins, marking the year that the first unarmed, at the time, first free black man was killed by a police officer. We heard President Biden invoke the words of Tyre Nichols' mom, saying that he was a beautiful soul and something good will come of this. I certainly wish Mrs. Wells grace and peace. That something good might not come in the form of police reform legislation because the underlying fundamentals haven't changed a bit since the George Floyd bill was tanked.
Yes.
Right. What we have now is, before you had a Democratic-controlled House, Democratic-controlled Senate, and a Democratic president in the White House. It passed the House, but then went down in a ball of flames in the Senate because Cory Booker of New Jersey, Democrat, and Tim Scott, Republican of South Carolina, couldn't come to an agreement. With the help of now Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, when she was a member of Congress, who helped shepherd it through. And it all fell apart over qualified immunity and other things. But now the idea that you would get a George Floyd Justice and Policing Act or any kind of police reform through the Congress that is there now is wishful thinking. I do think that the White House, the president in particular, and certainly Majority Leader Schumer and Minority Leader Jeffries in the House, they are also very well aware of the reality that they face. But I think they also know that they can't not try, that they must do something. That we saw Tyre Nichols. Before Tyre Nichols, there was Walter Scott in South Carolina. There have been many. And so if they give up, even in the face of the impossibility, then they are saying to Americans, they're saying to Black Americans, we don't care. And from all the meetings that I've been to today, from listening to the President of the United States, there's no doubt in my mind that they care.
Respectfully, who cares if they care? If their caring doesn't result in action, that's my beef. Who cares if they bleed in their heart over it, as they say, their bleeding hearts? It doesn't matter if you don't do something. The thing to do is to keep doing what Biden did, however, hanging around the necks of the GOP.
People's hopes,
because they're the problem.
Who care about this issue, that something can get done, when it looks like nothing can get done.
Well, no, I mean, sure, you can blame them if Democrats in their message don't say, we're on board, but the Republicans aren't. You have to talk about the issue and then talk about the impediment to the solution. And the impediment to the solution are the
GOP.
Republicans.
Yes, sir.
And so keep hammering away at the topic, at the issue, because unfortunately, there is going to be another Tyree Nichols. We just don't know where. We just don't know when. And it breaks my heart that I even can say that with supreme confidence, but that's where we are.
As we're watching now President Biden make his way out of the chamber, we are joined for some reaction by Democratic Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill of New Jersey. She serves on the Armed Services Committee and on the new Select Committee on China.
They're keeping that double screen
Sherrill,
up.
thank you for joining us. Just give us your quick takeaway in terms of what you heard.
Keeping that double screen up so we can see when the GOP is going to start.
He came out with a strong message of bipartisanship, but then there were some raucous moments in which he had some back and forth with Republican members in that chamber.
And
what did you make
so.
of that?
Well, I think it's the president's focus on bipartisanship that is so important as we go into this new divided Congress. I also think he made some strong statements about what we have achieved and how it's going to impact the future, and then made some pleas to people in the chamber to continue this work, to make sure we continue to move forward on infrastructure and reshoring American manufacturing and our strategic competition with China. And it was good to hear the president stand up to that, because I know within the caucus we have a lot of bipartisan support to move forward on our new China committee.
One of the key Republican criticisms we've heard specifically in the last few days, of course, has been the administration's response to the discovery of that spy balloon from China. A lot of Republicans accusing him of not moving fast enough. Do you think the president did enough to quell some of those concerns?
You know, I was just in a House Armed Services Committee hearing this morning on China, and that question was presented to the former Indo-PACOM admiral. Did we act quickly enough? And he seemed very pleased with that situation. He complimented the administration on being thoughtful from everything he's seen, and certainly recovering the information from that surveillance equipment since we shot it down over the water. So I am still delving into the situation and getting...
Look, let's just be clear. If a bunch of people hadn't noticed that balloon, but the U.S. government had, we wouldn't have done anything. That happened. That surveillance balloon is the sort of thing that happens all the time. This was a political stunt. Shoot it down, don't shoot it down, whatever. It was something that, in my opinion, was blown way out of proportion.
Economic policies and steps he was proposing and touting. As you look ahead to this divided Congress, where do you see the shared areas of interest where you believe Democrats and Republicans can work together to get something done?
Interesting.
Well, you certainly laid out some of the obvious ones, right? I was on the Defense Critical Supply Chain Task Force. My base, Picatinny Arsenal, does so much with our munitions supply chain, and we look at rare earth minerals and where we are receiving goods into the supply chain, making it more resilient. So that's an area, defense and otherwise, that we can all work together and we all agree must be addressed. There are other things like rebuilding our nation's infrastructure, reshoring American manufacturing. There was a lot of support in that chamber for Made in America and building with American-made goods. I think these are areas of broad bipartisan support. And then there are areas where I will be looking if we can't come together and build that bipartisan support. For example, on child care. As a working mom of 4 kids, we know that investments in child care are going to be investments in strengthening our economy. The president discussed Head Start, such a key piece of how we impact the future and the future of our children. So those are areas that might not be as obvious.
All right, so let me be clear. The only places that Democrats are going to be able to work with Republicans are on issues where, A, Republicans haven't taken a bribe yet, and B, that hasn't been picked up by Fox News as culture war nonsense yet. Very narrow avenue of attack.
Joining us tonight. Congresswoman, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Amy Walter, in many ways, this State of the Union address can be viewed as a soft launch of President Biden's re-election campaign. We don't know when he's going to announce. We've certainly not talked to a White House official yet who has said the president's not going to run for office. He used the phrase in the speech tonight, finish the job. He used that phrase 12 times about implementing infrastructure, the infrastructure law, shoring up Medicare, expanding education access, police reform, gun reform. This seems like if he's not able to get this done in the next 2 years, this was him saying, hold on,
that's
folks.
My re-election,
that's the re-election
campaign.
Yeah, he's not going
right.
to be able to get anything
and
done.
I think what you're going to hear from Republicans, especially what we're already starting to hear from people like Nikki Haley, like Ron DeSantis, is we're going to make a generational change, right? So he may want to finish the job. We think another generation needs to step in to be able to do that. So that's going to be, you can already sort of see the battle lines
That's
drawing
them
up
saying
then on what
they're no longer going to even try to get the youth vote. They're just going to try to get older folks to screw over the youth.
One of the reasons why Republicans selected her was to make this contrast.
Also, Real Bill P says Trump added $7.8 trillion to the debt plus interest. Damn. Yes, that's a man who knows his figures. You're right. He did. And that should be mentioned by Biden every time he gets heat over that.
State who is not feeling at all encumbered by worrying about what is this going to do for her own sort of chances. You know, usually these responses have been given to the rising star, the person that they think, okay, this is somebody on the bench who we're going to see run for much higher office. But it never has worked out that well for that person. So now it seems like what they're putting up front is the generational change, and also somebody who been in and around the Trump orbit and knows how to fight very well with Democrats.
And we're going to listen to that message in just a moment. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the new governor of Arkansas, is delivering the Republican response to the State of the Union tonight from Little Rock. She's no stranger to a presidential address. Sanders previously served as the White House press secretary for the first 2 years of the Trump administration. Let's go live now to Governor Sanders.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
Oh, Jesus.
Being a mom to 3 young children taught me not to believe every story I hear. So forgive me for not believing much of anything I heard tonight from President Biden. From out-of-control inflation and violent crime to the dangerous border crisis and threat from China, Biden and the Democrats have failed you. They know it, and you know it. And it's time for a change. Tonight, let us reaffirm our commitment to a timeless American idea that government exists not to rule the people, but to serve the people. Democrats want to rule us with more government control, but that's not who we are. America is the greatest country the world has ever known because we're the freest country the world has ever known, with a people who are strong and resilient. 5 months ago, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer.
Ooh,
it was a hard time for our family, particularly our kids, Scarlett, Huck, and George. But we kept our faith and persevered. Thanks to exceptional doctors here in Arkansas, a successful surgery, and the grace of God, I am cancer-free.
Hey, good for you.
Through it all, I couldn't help but think about my mom. She was 20 years old and in her first year of marriage when she was diagnosed with spinal cancer. The doctors told her she might not live, and if she did live, they said she'd never walk again.
Man, you just know they don't have much to say in response when they go off on long personal stories at the beginning.
As the new governor of Arkansas, and is speaking to you tonight. Adversity and fear of the unknown can paralyze us, but faith propels us to charge boldly ahead. We can't stand still in the face of great challenges. You and I were put on this earth for such a time as this, to charge boldly
not great
ahead.
Language.
I'll be the first to admit, President Biden and I don't have a lot in common. I'm for freedom, he's for government control. At 40, I'm the youngest.
When they talk about loosening regulations, they phrase it like they're talking about loosening regulations on you. They're actually talking about loosening regulations on your boss. Not even your direct manager, the person that owns whatever company you work for. Or, if you are lucky enough to own your own company, first of all, well done. Second of all, they're talking about loosening regulations on your major competition, the billion-dollar companies. That's who they want to loosen regulations on. And it does not make you more free. It makes you less free because you are then subject to their power unregulated.
Or is simply too weak to resist it. His administration has been completely hijacked by the radical left.
What?
The dividing line in America is no longer between right or left. The choice is between normal or crazy. It's time
accurate.
For a new generation.
I don't think in the way she's trying to say, but accurate.
Upon taking office just a few weeks ago, I signed executive orders to ban CRT, racism, and indoctrination in our schools. Eliminate the use of derogatory term Latinx in our government. Repealed COVID orders and said never again to authoritarian mandates and shutdowns. Americans want common sense from their leaders.
So you are getting an advertisement for what's wrong with America from Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
President Biden inherited the fastest economic recovery on record, the most secure border in history, cheap, abundant, homegrown energy, fast rising wages, a rebuilt military, and a world that was stable and at peace. But over the last 2 years, Democrats destroyed it all. Despite Democrats' trillions in reckless spending and mountains of debt, we now have the worst border crisis in American history.
Cut the deficit by 1.5 trillion. Remember that.
My heart breaks for every parent who has lost a son or daughter to addiction. 100,000 Americans a year are now killed from drug overdoses, largely from fentanyl pouring across our southern border. Yet the Biden administration refuses to secure the border and save American lives. And after
have you ever noticed that they don't get very specific when they're saying secure the border? Do they even know what they're calling for? What are they calling for? That's how we got the wall. They're always so vague on that nobody has any sense of what that might actually look like.
President Biden's weakness puts our
They don't either. They don't know what they're talking about. They're just distracted.
Refusal to stand up to China, our most formidable adversary, is dangerous.
I don't think it's an important issue in and of itself, but she's saying he refuses to stand up to China right after we shot down a Chinese craft. He's a silly weather balloon spy, whatever. But come on, Sarah.
The Biden administration seems more interested in woke fantasies than the hard reality Americans face every day. Most Americans simply want to live their lives in freedom and peace. But we are under attack.
We're going to try to stop that.
War we didn't start and never wanted to fight. Every day we are told we must partake in their rituals, salute their flags, and worship their false idols. All while big government colludes with big tech to strip away the most American thing there is, your freedom of speech. That's not normal. It's crazy, and it's wrong. Make no mistake, Republicans will not surrender this fight. We will lead with courage and do what's right.
Talk about every accusation being a projection.
Republicans believe in an America where strong families
Gotta worship the false idols, huh? Gotta salute your flag, huh?
And paychecks are rising.
What was the flag they put up on the Capitol when they were rioting? Oh, it was a Trump flag. That's right.
It's the birthright of every man, woman, and child. These are the principles Republican governors are fighting for, and in Washington, under the leadership of Senate Republicans and Speaker Kevin McCarthy, we will hold the Biden administration accountable. Down the street from where I sit is my alma mater, Little Rock Central High. As a student there, I will never forget watching my dad, Governor Mike Huckabee, and President Bill Clinton hold the doors open to the Little Rock Nine. Doors that 40 years earlier had been closed to them because they were black. Today, those children once barred from the schoolhouse are now heroes, memorialized in bronze.
And in honor of them, I am going to name a bill after them. A bill which will give bazookas to police officers who need to issue traffic tickets and feel like blowing up a sedan once in a while.
Is the civil rights issue of our day.
Oh, shut the
Tomorrow,
hell up.
I will unveil an education package that will be the most far-reaching, bold, conservative education reform in the country.
It will ban potato heads from being available in daycares. Because for some reason, I don't remember why, for some reason we're angry at Mr. Potato Head.
By increasing their starting salary from one of the lowest to one of the highest in the nation. Here in Arkansas and across America,
that would be
Republicans are working to end the policy of trapping kids in failing schools and sentencing them to a lifetime of poverty.
She's talking about defunding public schools.
Indoctrinate our kids.
She's talking about making schools worse in order to not trap kids in schools. What's her answer to that? More funding for private schools, more tax breaks for private schools. In other words, private business. In other words, the schools rich kids get to go to get better, while the schools poor kids have to go to don't. That's what she's talking about.
Tragedy of 9/11.
Bit of a see you next Tuesday.
A generation brimming with passion and new ideas to solve age-old problems. A generation moored to our deepest values.
New ideas like solving them.
Yet unafraid to challenge the present order and find a better way forward. If we seize this moment together, America can once again be the land of the free and the home of the brave. During my 2.5 years at the White House, I traveled on every foreign trip with the president. A trip I will never forget was on December 25th of 2018.
He took his pants down and ran around the cabin of Air Force One. We tried to stop him, but it wasn't going to happen without wrestling him, and no one was up for that.
When I had to walk out on my own family's Christmas, unable to tell them where I was going that night.
But delighted just to be, getting out of there.
So dangerous. They didn't want anybody to know that the president was going to be on the ground, even for a few hours. We boarded Air Force One in complete and total darkness. There were no lights on the plane, no lights on the runway. Our phones and computers shut down and turned in.
Why we didn't notice he'd taken off the pants until, he had done a couple of laps up and down.
12 hours later, in the pitch black of night, we landed in the war-torn part of western Iraq. It was again a similar scene. No lights on the plane, no lights on the runway. The only thing you could see was coming from about a mile away in a dining hall where hundreds of troops who were in the fight against ISIS had gathered expecting to celebrate Christmas with senior military.
They were there because George W. Bush lied.
They had absolutely no.
I want to remind you of that. 20 years later, because of a lie George W. Bush said.
About to walk into that room.
No punishment for that, by the way.
And when they did, it was a sight and a scene and a sound I hope I never forget.
You see, he still hadn't put on the pants, so when he walked in, the gasp was both horror and awe that he was somehow alive despite supporting himself on two bendy straws of legs.
Started chanting.
And wearing a full-grown, a Depends diaper. It was something.
Again. USA, USA, USA.
Oh,
it was an absolutely perfect picture of what makes our country great. One of the young soldiers.
Big gulps. Diabetes, untreated.
I re-enlisted in the
literally doing sexual favors for gallons of gasoline.
Son, I'm here
America.
Because of you. Shortly after, that young soldier came up to me. He said, Sarah, you have a tough job.
He said, Sarah, denying my health care and ensuring that when I get back is going to be tough. You're going to be held to account for it, and I just want you to know, Sarah, me, the hypothetical soldier in your story, I'm behind you. I believe in what you're doing, ensuring that I have no medical treatment waiting for me home. I got no social safety net whatsoever. You are what's great about America.
We are in this together. Overwhelmed with emotion and speechless, I just hugged him with tears in my eyes and a grateful heart for our heroes who keep us free.
And I reiterate, doing absolutely nothing legislatively to help them. I felt emotion as I knew I would absolutely betray this young man in every possible way. Felt good, felt right.
Our part in the fight for freedom. America is great because we are free. But today, our freedom is under attack, and the America we love is in danger.
Jeez.
President Biden and the Democrats have failed you, and it's time for a change. A new generation of Republican leaders are stepping up, not to be caretakers of the status
Marjorie
quo,
Taylor Greene,
but to be change makers for the American
Lauren
people.
Boebert, you've seen him. George
We
Santos.
know not what the future holds.
Sure is a new generation
But we know
of Republican
who
leaders.
holds the future in his hands. And with God as our witness, we will show the world that America is still the place where freedom reigns and liberty will never die. Thank you. God bless you.
No matter how
And God
hard I
bless
try to kill it,
America.
it just won't die.
And we have been listening to Republican Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, former White House press secretary for former President Donald Trump, the youngest governor in the country, the first female governor in Arkansas, seeking to undercut President Biden's State of the Union address, saying that he's weak, that he's beholden to, quote, woke fantasies, and that he's
Just real
untethered
quick,
from the mainstream.
Arkansas has had a whole lot of Republican governors. Look where it is in terms of GDP per capita. It's actually number 49.
That Americans want common sense from their leaders, but in Washington, she said, the Biden administration is doubling down on crazy. What are we to make of that?
Well, she hit some issues which are good Republican issues. I mean, the cultural issues are good Republican issues. They've won some elections off that. I think the fentanyl on the border is a good issue. We legitimately have problems at the border. China is an issue they're trying to get mileage out of. I'm not sure they are getting mileage out of. Education reform has suddenly become a good Republican issue. After decades in which Democrats had huge advantages in education, now it's sort of dead even. And so those are some issues I was not surprised to see her hit.
Hold up.
I think the one
No, it isn't.
Is
it's an issue they talk about a lot. It's not become a good Republican issue. It's just an issue that they talk about a lot. There's a difference. What they talk about is privatizing, always privatizing. Now they want to privatize schools. Betsy DeVos, goddamn her, got that started in Michigan. I'm so sorry we let that spiral out of control.
In the Biden speech, when he's attacking
Awful.
corporations, Republicans are reflexively not going along with him, seeming to slip back into, oh, yeah,
It's
we're
true.
the corporate party again. And so they really have to make up their mind. Are they a populist party or are they the old Republican Party?
You may hear you saying, that's
Yeah,
right, that's right.
I thought the exact same thing, that this was very similar to what we heard in the 2022 campaign. It was very heavy on culture war. Also, they did talk a lot about inflation and trying to attach Biden to it. But what I heard from many Democrats and Republican strategists, especially after the election was over, was we didn't have a message. We said Biden has an inflation problem. We tried to make it all about Biden, and yet what voters were telling us back was, okay, we get it. We don't think Joe Biden's doing a very good job on the economy, but what is your answer to that? And there hasn't been an answer to that. That's not clearly what
No answer.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the governor of Arkansas, was doing. What will be very interesting to see, though, are how some of the other Republican
Trying to do.
governors or former governors going to talk about the economy, especially since they are the ones now in charge of running as an executive and how that gets played in.
Yeah. Jonathan Capehart, I saw you scribbling furiously as Governor Sanders
get ready
was
for a
speaking
whole
there.
lot
It
of
also
nothing
strikes me
out of
there was
Republicans.
this message she repeatedly hit about a
Performative
new
nonsense.
generation of leaders. She wanted to hit that contrast between the place she holds and President Biden as she presented.
I was so glad she said that. I was so glad. Tear him to bits, my friend.
President, whose name she did not mention
Talk
in,
about
in
these
those
new
remarks.
Republican
but what was
leaders.
your
Who's
takeaway?
also 79 years old. David, I'm glad you brought up the fact that one thing she didn't talk about was the economy. You took her speech seriously in a way I couldn't the moment she said that he's a man who can't say what a woman is. This speech, I'm trying not to levitate from my chair because there were so many. She leaned so hard into the culture wars that she just slid right into ignorance. And for her to say, to revel in the fact that she is an alum of Little Rock Central High School and lauding the Little Rock Nine and their statues, they're memorialized, when the Republicans, particularly in Florida, but I guess now in Arkansas, are going to make it illegal for students to learn about why the Little Rock Nine are significant and are in bronze in Little Rock. This speech was entirely offensive. When she talks about, Republicans are there for freedom and Americans, which Americans and what freedoms? What about the trans kids whose they've got targets on their backs? Or kids, LGBTQ kids in schools, or black kids in schools who can't learn their history because government is making it illegal? Wonderful, she's the youngest governor in Arkansas, and she's drawing these contrasts with an 80-year-old president. But thank goodness we have an 80-year-old president who just gave a speech to the nation, the entire nation, about what he wants to do for them. There was that moment when the president said, look, you guys you voted against the infrastructure bill, but then you show up and take credit for the projects and the jobs that come, and I look forward to you guys doing it again. She doesn't have that message. The message that she just gave to the nation and on behalf of the Republican Party just proves to me that the Republican Party is lost. Not lost, it's gone. And if they're going to keep digging themselves into these cultural war issues, great, more power to them. It's great for the Republican the Republican base, I guess, but the country in the last midterm election said that we don't like that that's not right, that's not fair. And so that's why when Joe Biden says, when he growls at the end of his speech, we are the United States of America, it always moves me because I know he's talking to me, and I know that there are millions of Americans, whether they voted for him or not, feel probably to their bones that even though I might not like the guy, I might not like his policies, but at least I know he's thinking about trying to make my life better. Sarah Huckabee Sanders did the opposite tonight.
Let's bring in Lisa Desjardins, who is still on the Hill for us tonight. Lisa, I know from speaking...
Real Bill P, welcome to the members area. My friend, I'm delighted to have you.
Right. They felt that she, as someone who had helped a former president write a State of the Union, that she was in a better position perhaps to deliver one. I brought up this idea that in the past these response speeches have not gone well, especially for governors, but for all kinds of different people making the response. They said their approach was that she was not going to try and compete with President Biden, but instead try and lay out the Republican agenda on its own. I have to say, listening to her remarks immediately after leaving the chamber and listening to President Biden's remarks, it was really a startling contrast in political approach. And I think that what we may find is from Governor Huckabee Sanders' remarks is that she has probably set the tone for the 2024 Republican primary race, and potentially between these two speeches, both of them, could set sort of the approach of both parties. Now, I think what I heard in her speech was really going beyond laying out the Republican agenda, not just saying that Joe Biden is a failure or bad for this country, but instead trying to lay out the idea that somehow he is not just anti-American, but also anti-God. This is really a speech that has gone kind of a farther distance than I think we've seen before from Republicans, laying out the stakes, not just as a country that can do better or worse. President Biden saying, our country's doing better. Give us more time. Let's finish the job. So that I heard Governor Huckabee Sanders saying rather, no, we are on the edge of an abyss of a moral and societal civilization kind of crisis, a very dark picture she was painting, laying at the feet of Democrats. without using the same kind of numbers or backup evidence, using just ideas and putting out this idea of cultural differences. I just am thinking about what's coming next. I'm thinking about the faces I saw in the chamber tonight, both below me. I was sitting above the Republican side. I saw the Republican side at first kind of politely clapping, embracing the idea of thanking all of the leadership from all of the parties, and then moving toward a time when I saw many different members yelling out at the president, even as I saw the VIP guests around me, sometimes with tears in their eyes as their stories were being told, especially Black Americans I saw in the chamber talking about police reform. I saw 2 different young Black men with tears in their eyes. Nobody else was watching them. In the top row of the chamber, you could tell they were moved and they were concerned about safety of people like them, the deaths of people like them. So all of these emotions
Also wanted to say about Sarah Sanders' speech, she wasn't talking about, when she was talking about what she was going to do, as she was talking about as little facts as possible, as little specifics as possible, just broad strokes culture war nonsense, because she has to distract. They don't have the American people's best interest in mind.
2024 election.
Lisa Desjardins, our thanks to you, and of course to Laura Barone Lopez as well.
David Brooks, I'm curious to hear your take on Lisa's reporting there. If the State of the Union address was seen as a potential sort of preview of what President Biden's reelection campaign could look like, do you take Governor Sanders' remarks as a potential preview of what the Republican nominee will be messaging on?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the whether it's DeSantis or Trump or somebody else, the culture is going to be a big issue. The Republicans' -- issue. Look, I'm a journalist. I've just tried to understand. We're in an evenly divided
culture
country.
war nonsense.
I try to understand what the other side is thinking, and I think if you look at how DeSantis has approached this, how Trump approached this, how Ted Cruz approaches this, I think their #1 issue is that a lot of Republicans think there's a coastal cultural elite that looks down on them and that is way to their left on them on values issues. And that's a legitimate point of view. And so she's going heavy on that. Is it a successful fight against Joe Biden, who's not really part of the coastal cultural elite?
It's not a legitimate issue.
But
by the way,
it's what Republicans have gone to and what populists around the world have gone to. And
people
so
who are richer than them are not to the left
The
of that.
difference is that after 2020, where
not in major numbers, no, sir.
President Trump leaned into his base. I mean, he talked almost exactly like this. It was about turning out the base, engaging the base, enraging the base, and coming up short. And candidates on the Republican side who have only engaged their base in swing states, and we saw it in 2022 in the Senate, coming up short. So it is, as a general election message, it is not likely to be as powerful as it will be in a Republican.
Here's the issue they have. Their base is what their base wants, as we discussed earlier in the previous stream, is abhorrent to everybody else. It's anti-democratic. It's full-on violent. It's fascism. It's abhorrent to everybody else. And their base does not have enough numbers to win a general election. So you find these wackadoos constantly losing elections, unless it's in a deep red area, in which case they win by default. But then you have to deal with the consequences of them actually legislating, and it's a nightmare.
80% of those people said to Pew, not only do we have different priorities, but we fundamentally disagree about core American values. That is
80%
at its challenge. What
in a
are
Pew Research poll.
polarizations about? Core American values. That's where the difference is, not just on, should we talk about jobs or the economy or immigration?
Jonathan, you have 30 seconds left, friend. You have the final word.
Look, the great thing about the State of the Union is that we hear what the president has to say, his vision for the country, and then we get to watch what he does after. And so tomorrow he's going to Wisconsin, and the vice president's going out. Everyone's going out around the country. Will they maintain this energy that the president showed tonight? Will they maintain that not just tomorrow, but through the end of the year?
We will watch and we will see. Jonathan Capehart, David Brooks, Amy Walter, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And that concludes our special live coverage of the President's State of the Union address. We hope.
And it also concludes my live coverage. Let's have a gander here real quick at the comments. Man, I love it. Swan saying hi to Real Bill P. What's up, Swan? Good to see you as well. Jim Green says, stepping up to crush y'all. Fair enough. Real Bill P, using the emojis. I love it. I guarantee that Sarah Huckabee couldn't define CRT. Real Bill P, I guarantee you're right. She could not. Jim Green says, Arkansas, the brain trust of the American right. Oh, my friend. Oh, my friend. You're on what you can do right now. That means we got the facts to back up the opinions. You're quite correct. In fact, well, that's not what I meant. There we go. In fact, all right, there's the broad strokes. That's what's been happening to America as the right has gone more right and the left has gone more right since 1970, the last 53 years. We now have the upper class, the rich, holding more money than everybody else. And why is that? Well, it's this right chaw. This right here is each state. It's color-coded, and it's color-coded to represent which governing party controls them. Republicans or Democrats. Red is Republican-controlled. Blue, Democrat. And to underline your point, this is their gross domestic product per capita, as in each person, the money available to them per person, the amount of money made by each person. So if you have, say, a bunch of rich people in one town and a bunch of poor people in another, and they're in the same district, it doesn't average that out. This says what the average person holds. Have a look at where Arkansas falls on that list. Second from the bottom. Arkansas has been under GOP control since forever. Deep red means the state's doing worse, by and large. The only true exception up there is North Dakota. North Dakota has had benefits from where it is geographically to offset some of this. They also have benefits from military production facilities. Alaska, a bit of an outlier because of the relatively small population to land. However, the rest, look at the trends. And you know what? Let's not even put the pin in North Dakota and Alaska. However they get there is fine. Look at the general trend. If it is run by Democrats, it's doing okay. If it is run by Republicans, it is not. Have a look at Michigan. It's number 38 on that list. Bear in mind the United States average is up there as well, so that pushes everything below it down one. Michigan was horribly gerrymandered until 2018, which meant that even though Michigan bounced between Democrat and Republican control, our state legislature was very often disproportionately red, which meant Michigan was run worse. This is the era when we got Betsy DeVos in Michigan making decisions for our schools. God help us. It hurt. It hurt bad. And Michigan suffered. Michigan has been climbing on this list since 2018. If you have gerrymandering as an issue in your state, if you check and see if your state is gerrymandered, look and see if it has something called an independent redistricting commission. By the way, that is how you fight gerrymandering. But as to your point, Arkansas being the how did you phrase that? Arkansas being the brain trust of the American right. You are completely correct. That is, Arkansas is what you get as I suppose the template for what the American right ends up doing in other states, and it shows. It absolutely shows. Real Bill P says trickle-down economics have failed the people. Yes. As per this, yes, right in line with the popularity of trickle-down economics. We have, ironically, the middle income, the middle class, trickling down in the way you don't want. Incidentally, in 1970, the tax rate in the richest tax bracket was 50? No, excuse me. Let me do some quick math. 70%. In currently, I believe we are at, 37? It's gone down 40 points. So we have consistently been using trickle-down economics as an excuse to give more tax breaks to the rich. And as a result, we have had the opposite of what was said of what they said would happen happening, wherein the rich have simply hoarded that wealth, kept it away from the rest of us, even though American labor production has skyrocketed in that time. The advent of computers, the advent of technology, with more people joining the workforce, yes, it's skyrocketed. And yet, American pay, no, sir. No, it's gone down. Joe Biden, in my opinion, is not an ideal president. I've never even seen a candidate run that I would call an ideal president. But despite that, he is a good president, by and large. He deals with reality. He puts forth practical solutions, generally speaking. And tonight he gave a State of the Union, which I feel knocked it out of the park. He did what I was hoping he would do. He made it clear who is doing what and where America stands. He made it clear that he started by saying what was accomplished when Democrats ran everything. We had 2 glorious years. And God help us, we unfortunately had Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin who were stopping the best of it from occurring. But he did show what happens when Democrats are in control of everything. He showed what we could still do, and most importantly, he told you who's going to stop it from happening. That's the GOP. That is the message that needed to get out tonight. I am glad he did it. I feel that if he can keep up this pressure, we are going to look at a very good 2024 campaign season. Let's hope that he's able to do it. Well, folks, I had a delight hanging out with you today. It's going to take a minute to upload the VOD, but that will be up later on in the early morning. If you enjoyed the stream, I hope you'll consider liking, subscribing. If you really enjoy it, you're interested in some of those GIFs, some of those emojis, and of course, the occasional post from your old pal Jake that's just for members, consider joining the Friends of Doris. That's our members group, named after the very first subscriber of content, Doris Lashevsky. Big fan of that gal. Well, this has been WYCD Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. My name's Jake, and outros are very difficult for me. I'll see you next time.
Oh, no.